Let's see how we can create a simple vector portrait, starting with an image in Photoshop. We're going to prepare the image so that we can get a good result from image trace in Illustrator, and then we will colorize the result in Illustrator. So first of all, in Photoshop, I'm going to come to the background layer and convert this to a smart object so that I can apply some filters to it. The filters I will be applying are Smart Sharpen at a massive amount, the maximum amount and a radius of 6 pixels. This amount of sharpening photographically looks terrible, but it is going to make it easier to convert the image into a line drawing. Next, I'll come to Stylize and to Oil Paint. I'll experiment with the amount of stylization and cleanliness. I'm going to go for 3 and 2 respectively. Lighting is deselected. Now I will add a threshold adjustment layer which will convert everything that is darker than 50% grey to black and everything that is lighter than 50% grey to white. I could experiment with the threshold level for less or more, but I'm actually going to leave that where it is and then add in a dodging and burning layer here, which will allow me to paint in or paint out detail. I'll hold down Option or Alt and click on Create New Layer. The mode of this new layer will be Overlay, and I will fill this with Overlay Neutral 50% grey. Now I'll switch to my brush tool by pressing B and change the opacity of my brush to 50% by pressing 5. I'll start out by painting in white, and I'd like to introduce some more highlights to the hair. So I'll just paint over the hair and you can see things are getting lighter. I also feel like there's too much shadow beneath the chin, so I'll remove that shadow just by painting over it. And if we take a look at this dodge burn layer, it looks like this. Wherever this is lighter than 50%, it's going to lighten the layer beneath, and wherever it is darker, it will darken what's beneath. I'll press X to switch to black as my foreground color, and then maybe just paint in a bit more detail on the t-shirt. So there's going to be some back and forth here between painting in black and painting in white, depending on just how much detail you want and what kind of detail you would like to tease out. Now when I'm happy with this, I'll save it and we'll come to Illustrator, create a new document. I'll just have this be landscape, letter size, and I will place the image in Illustrator. I'll come and fit my artboard to the selected art and then click on Image Trace. Let's come and have a look at the tracing options. I am going to increase the path fitting. I'm going to increase this to 85%. That's going to result in more anchor points, but it's going to trace the image more accurately. And for the noise slider, I'm going to reduce this so that it picks up on more small details. Now, I might find at this point that I just need to modify my original a little bit in Photoshop. I think we just need a little bit of detail on the teeth. So I'm going to come back here and just add that in by painting in black on my dodge and burn layer. I'll save this. We come back to Illustrator, we update in place, and the trace will also update. Okay, so if I'm now happy with how the trace looks, I need to commit to it by expanding it. But before I do that, I will choose to ignore white so that we are only tracing the black pixels, and then expand. We can now hide the image trace panel I'm just going to zoom out by pressing Command minus. I now need to use a path that I had drawn around the subject in Photoshop to define the basic fill of the color, which is going to be the skin tone. So I'll switch back to Photoshop. On my paths panel, I have this path already defined. I'll activate it. I'll come to my path selection tool and select it, Command C to copy, switch back to Illustrator and paste it, Command or Control V. Paste it as a compound shape. Now, unfortunately, it comes in at a different size, so I do now need to just scale it. Scale it so that it matches what we have here in Illustrator. I'm going to put this on a separate layer. I want the new layer to go beneath my current layer, so I'll hold down Command and Option when I click on Create New Layer. This gives me the option to name it, and I'm going to call it Skin, and it also puts it beneath the previous layer. Switching back to Photoshop now, I'll turn off the adjustment layers and the filters and deactivate the path. I'll select all, Command or Control C, switch back to Illustrator, Command or Control V. I'm just pasting in a reference copy here of the image. I'll scale this down and I'll move it to a new layer. I'm using this just to sample the colors from. I'll come and select my skin layer by clicking on its bullseye, and I realize that I never actually moved that compound path to it, so I need to select that path and move it down to that layer. Now when I select it, I can come and choose my eyedropper tool and I'll sample the skin color. Let's now lock that layer, create a new layer above this, and on this new layer, which I will call color, I'm just going to be painting in some colors. I'll be doing this with the blob brush tool, and I'm going to start with the hair. I'll use yellow to start with, which I can certainly rein in if I need to, but let's have this be a rather garish yellow. And I can now just paint this. And it doesn't matter, as you'll see in a moment, if I go outside of the lines. So we don't need to worry about being super accurate here. So now to fix this up, I'll come to my layers. Let's just unlock the skin layer, because on that layer I have this compound path which I want to use as a clipping mask for my color layer. I'll hold down the Option or Alt key and drag that selected path to the layer above and choose Make or Release Clipping Mask. I'm going to use the same approach for the t-shirt. Making sure that nothing is selected, I'll sample the color, switch to my blob brush tool, and then just paint in the basic shape of the t-shirt. Because it is on the layer that already has the clipping mask applied to it, where I go outside of the shape, that's not a problem. I do need to just fix up this area down here where I've overlapped some of the other color. So I can do this using my eraser tool, but I want to make sure I don't delete anything from the layer beneath. So that needs to be locked, and so too does layer 1, which contains my outline. And that way I'm only deleting content from my color layer. Okay, now moving on to the whites of the eyes and the teeth. This is also going to go on the same layer. Change my color to white, make sure that I'm in my blob brush, and I can now just paint over that area of the mouth and the whites of the eyes. Now let's address the lips. I already have the path for the lips. It's on layer 1. I will need to come and unlock layer 1. Using my direct selection tool, holding down the Option or Alt key so that it functions as my group selection tool, I'll select the area of the lips and apply a color to that. I'm also going to come and select those two black paths right there and apply the same color to those. So now to finish this, I'll zoom out and just fix up some of my sloppy brushwork. On the Layers panel, I'll come and Option or Alt click in the locking column to make sure that the color layer is unlocked and the other layers are locked. Switch to the eraser tool and then just delete some of these areas here where I've painted outside of the lines. But really, this is all about how you prepare the image first of all in Photoshop, using the filters, the Smart Sharpen, the oil paint, the threshold adjustment layer, and the dodge and burn layer to tease out more information from the image.